going on, everybody? It's Monday, and it's a special Monday because tonight is my first ever live stream that I've ever hosted by myself. And it's by myself, so I need all of you to show up for me for that live stream. And remember, we're giving away that Mickey Mantle card tonight. So, this week on the episode, from last week, for this week's question, I was asking about, hey, the market is kind of soft right now. The sports card market, there's kind of some dipping going on. And so kind of what are our thoughts on that? In fact, let's take a look at the question that I posed to you last week. Let's look right here. Over the past couple of years, we're clearly in a down market for sports cards. As a result, what are your plans in regards to collecting sports cards over the next 12 months? Explain your strategy and plans for the next year. All right. So that was the question. So what are your plans? And I think we all have different plans. And again, the thing about my channel, the thing that I focus on really hard is this is not a one-way street. This is not I talk, you listen. Okay, that's the old school way of doing things, even in my classroom as a teacher. It shouldn't be I talk, you listen, you memorize. That's not how it works, especially in a situation like this channel where many of you have a ton of knowledge, more than me in a lot of areas. So I learn as much from you as any learning is taking place. That said, some of the responses from last week, from the question from last week, I thought were terrific. And some people brought up some points that I hadn't really thought about. So I chose 5 responses that we're going to take a look at, and I'm going to kind of give you my thoughts and why I chose that one and why I think it's such a good response and such a good answer and such a good idea. And some of my takeaways from those responses, because again, things are changing in all economies, including the sports card economy. So if that means that there's something that's changing, what we should probably do is adjust. Be ready to pivot. Be ready to change how we were planning on doing things based on what's happening. So let's take a look at the first response that I chose right here. I'm actually really hoping that people who are in it solely for the money and investments continue to leave. That will make buying opportunities for those of us that cherish the hobby abundant. I will continue to dollar cost average, purchasing players that I love, focusing on Hall of Fame runs, and continuing to collect these art forms that so powerfully connect me to so many meaningful things in my past. Man, if I was a teacher and I was grading a response, this would get such a high grade because of the different layers to it and the different things that were mentioned in it that I think are so great. Now, the first thing that I think is important for us to talk about is the fact that when the market went up, a lot of people entered the hobby or re-entered the hobby, one of the two. And a lot of people who did that had intentions beyond just being a collector and being a part of the hobby long term. A lot of people saw it as an opportunity. They said, wait a second, if this stuff is going up this fast and I can buy at a little discount, and while I'm buying it at a little discount, it continues to go up, I can make some margins. And if I do that in a high enough volume, I'm going to make some money here. And a lot of that money that was being made was from people that aren't really interested in what the actual medium or the content is. And the medium and the content is really something that a lot of us care about, which are the cards. So whenever somebody comes in with just the intention of profit, the true collector, the person who's really into whatever it is that is being purchased and sold, we get kind of frustrated that somebody's in there just for the purpose of benefiting financially. And I do think if the market turns, then a lot of people, are going to get out if they were planning on being in for the financial benefit, right? It's a lot harder to make money from something that is dropping in value than to make money from something that is going up in value. I mean, if you're an art collector, right? If you're a true art collector and the prices are completely secondary, you just love that art, then you don't want a bunch of investors coming in, buying the art, putting it in a safe, hoping it goes up to then sell it. You want it to be appreciated the way it was intended to be. And for us sports card collectors, our art, our medium are the sports cards. So I love that point in there, and I think you're right. A lot of them will probably be leaving the market. And by leaving the market, it's going to make things more affordable, and it's going to kind of keep it as a hobby of people who are truly into the topic instead of just there to profit. Now, the other thing that's mentioned in here that I think is a great thing to consider. See, a lot of people try to time markets. It doesn't matter if it's the stock market or the housing market or whatever. They go, I gotta buy now because prices are going way up. Or they say, I have to sell now because I think that we're at the top, or I have to buy now because I think we're at the bottom. And, a lot of people do that with their stock market portfolio. What they'll do is when things crash, they panic, they pull out of the market. And when they pull out of the market, it just makes things crash even more. And then they try to time the bottom. And then once it gets to the bottom, or what they think is the bottom, then they'll get back in and they try to time it. And quite frankly, trying to time any market, I think, is setting yourself up for problems. What a lot of investors do, like retirement investing. I mean, for over 20 years, I've been putting money into my retirement account. And I've not once pulled money out from my retirement account because I thought that the market was in a bad place. I just kept buying. And then when the market got really, really high, or has been really, really high, I don't buy less. I just keep buying the same steady amount. And that way, I'm buying at the average, right? I'm not going to kill it, but I'm not going to get killed. And that's called dollar cost averaging. If you just put in the same amount each month, each year, each week, whatever your buying preferences are, and you don't worry about what the market is doing, you're going to do medium, right? You're going to do average. And that's the whole point of that concept. So whenever you're trying to time the market, you might do well, but you might not. If you thought the market peak was 5 years ago and you didn't buy from 5 years ago to 3 years ago, you missed out on a huge spike in values. And then if you were buying 2 years ago or 3 years ago because you thought things were just getting started and now you're trying to sell, you're not doing super hot on a lot of cards. So sometimes when we try to just time the market, it ends up backfiring. So dollar cost averaging, put in your regular amount each month, each period, each year, whatever it is when you buy, and don't really worry about that. It will take care of itself and you'll do fine. I think those are a couple of great pieces of advice and great comments, and that's why I included them. Let's take a look at the second comment that I featured right here. My strategy over the next 12 months is to be patient and more selective. I will spend time enjoying what I already have, organizing it, and checklisting so I can focus on things I don't have. So, totally get this. I totally get this. When there's a buying frenzy going on, okay, if you don't have a house and you're trying to get into the housing market and the market's going up really fast and you're like, you need to buy a house, maybe you have to move, or you just got some money to be able to do the down payment or whatever, there becomes this frenzy where you're just like, I want anything. I got to buy right now, because if I don't buy right now, then I'm going to be priced out. And there have been a couple of spikes in the housing market over the last, 15 years where that has happened. If it's a new development, you show up at the development, you have the model that you like, and you show up and you say, hey, I'm interested in this model. And they say, well, we're all out of that model. It's sold out. But we do have this model available. And you go, well, I guess I'm going to buy that one, because if I don't buy that one, then by the next release, the prices will go up and I'll be priced out. And so you buy something that maybe you're not in love with just because you're trying to not miss out. And when you're in a market that's flat or more stable or even down, like it kind of seems like we're in now, you can take your time and be more selective, because things aren't going up by 10% a month. Things might even be going down by 10%, or they might be flat, or they might be going down by 2% or up by 3%. When they're flatter, you can be a lot more picky, and you can get exactly what you want. Maybe before, that card that you wouldn't have bid on because it's a little bit off center and you really like centering, you bid on it because you're like, well, if I don't buy this one, the next one that comes out is going to be so much more expensive. So just like when you showed up at the housing development and the buying frenzy was happening and you felt like you had to buy whatever was available, even if it wasn't the model that you liked, people were doing that with cards. And now, when the new development is having a hard time selling the houses, you can say, no worries, if you don't have the model I'm looking for, I'll wait for the next release when that model is available. It's the same thing with cars, right? People show up at car lots, and for years it was like, well, if you don't have the color I want, you don't have the black Ford F-150 that I want, I'm not buying one. But 2 years ago when we had, or even a year and a half ago, when we had that huge car shortage, and you'd show up and they say, well, we don't have a black one, but we have a white one. Showed up here this morning and said, I take it. I'll take it because at least now I'm going to get one. No, we're not in that market now. We're in a car lot full of cars with every model and every trim level you can think of. So you can be picky and wait for exactly the one that you want. You aren't going to miss out. That FOMO, that fear of missing out, is not a situation that we find ourselves in right now. So being more selective makes perfect sense to me. I love that comment. Let's take a look at the next one. There have been a lot of great deals on newly graded PSA slabs where cards certainly look undergraded. For example, a PSA 4 that looks like a 6 is something that I won't shy away from. The money savings with that strategy stretches my dollar further. I also think that the card boom inflation hasn't fully deflated. Prices for most of the popular Hall of Fame rookies that were pumped up during the boom haven't seemingly settled. So unless I find a good deal, I'll be gobbling up the undervalued second and third year cards of the same players. All right. 2 great things included in this comment that I want to talk about. The first is, if grading standards seem to be getting tougher, which I think we all kind of agree, especially some of the grading companies over others, the standards seem to be tougher regardless of what they are saying. They're clearly grading cards harder. There's just no, look at a card that was graded 20 years ago versus a card that's coming back now. It's at least a grade or 2 different from how it was. Now, that doesn't mean they all stand out. Again, that's a whole different rabbit hole. But the thing I want to point out that I totally agree with and I totally like is, if a PSA 6 looking card from, 15 years ago is now coming back as a 4, but that 4 is selling for 4 prices instead of 6 prices because a lot of people do buy the grade, not the card. They trust the eyes of the grader more than their own. So if a 4 really looks like a 6, like a lot of us are used to, buying the 4 is the way to go. I've bought up quite a few 5s, 5.5s, 4s recently that I think look sweet. And they look like 6s and 6.5s. So the fact that they're grading harder is a huge opportunity. And I did a video a while back where I even mentioned, I think that the number on the grade is going to start meaning less and less and less as we move forward, because the inconsistency and the changing in the standards makes it more of a range instead of a hard and fast law of how good the card is. So buying the 4s at 4 prices instead of buying the 6 that looks like a 4 is probably a good move. So I totally am on board with buying new, fresh grades that are 4s and 5s, because those are the 6s and the 7s of just a few years ago. And yeah, the second part of that makes a lot of sense. See, the rookie cards of the Grail, the GOATs, went up so much. I mean, the Steph Currys, the Tom Brady's, the Roberto Clemente's, the Mickey Mantles, the Willie Mays, those cards seemed to peak the highest. And as they peaked higher and higher and higher, it doesn't sometimes feel like the second and third year cards went up at the same rate that those rookie cards went up. And in fact, I'm planning on doing a video on exactly that topic soon, to actually take a look at the margin between a rookie and second year and third year, and the gaps in there, and have they widened, have they narrowed, what has happened over the last several years. So it's a topic that I'm definitely interested in, and I've already started working on that. But the point here being that if the rookies really spiked high and the second and third years didn't, that means the second and third years might be a pretty good deal, right? They go a long ways buying the second and third year compared to the rookie. So are the second and third year cards a really good deal? Has the deal for them gotten better? Because we are, as a hobby, obsessed with rookie cards. There's no doubt about it, and it understandably so. But if the proportion of the distance of the prices from the second year to the rookie card has widened, that might mean that the second year and the third year is the smarter place to go with your money. More on that in a video in the next week or so. But 2 great points, totally agree. And let's look at the next one. My plan is to keep buying what I love and hoping the price of a couple of Grail cards drops. I love this hobby, and at this point, I want cards at any price point that you can think of. I guess the only big change for me is, aside from a few big vintage Hall of Fame rookies, I'll probably be buying more 90s and early 2000s football than vintage this year. I have most of the big vintage football cards I want, and I have been feeling nostalgic for guys I watched as a kid. Yeah, this is a great comment again. And there's a topic in here, a point in here that I really think that we need to really grab hold of. And that's the whole Grail card thing. That's the super expensive card thing. You know, I have several eBay saved searches, and I buy on multiple different places. I multiple platforms, multiple auction sites, multiple different ways that I buy cards. And quite frankly, my favorite place to buy cards is in person at a card show. And the reason for that is, you know, the savings of the tax, the negotiation, the actually looking at the card in 3D instead of 2D on a picture. But one of the things I've noticed in my saved searches on different, buying platforms is a lot of the grail cards, a lot of the high demand expensive cards have suddenly started showing up again. For a while, those cards were not showing up. I'll give you an example. One of my saved searches is for T206 cards, any T206, all right? And I check it two, 3 times a day. What are the new listings on T206s? And I've had that same saved search for at least a year. And I've checked it 2 or 3 times a day for at least a year. And suddenly, there have been a lot of Ty Cobb cards showing up. And there have been more Walter Johnsons, and there have been more Cy Youngs, and there have been more Christy Mathewsons. Those cards, especially Ty Cobb, you might see one Ty Cobb card show up a week on a new T206 listing. I checked earlier this morning, and there were 3 or 4 new ones today. So we're constantly seeing some of those cards that we weren't seeing before. Suddenly, we're seeing them again. And one of the things that drove the price up of those cards was there weren't a lot of them out there. So when one would show up, there would be a little bit of a buying competition for them. The supply was close to 0. And now suddenly, the supply is starting to recover. And I don't know if it's people who have been using cards as income and they're saying, oh, I'm not making as much money right now, and so I need to sell a big card because I have some bills coming up. It could be that. It could be the drop in the market. They think it's going to drop more, so they're trying to sell it before it drops more. I don't really know why they're suddenly showing up, but a lot of those grail cards, a lot of those high-end cards. Another search that I've had for a long time is the 1951 Bowman. 1951 Bowman is a very popular set, a very famous set. It's got the Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle rookie cards, among others, Whitey Ford, Monty Irvin. There are others as well. But one of the things that I didn't see much of for a long time was occasionally I'd see a Whitey Ford rookie card. Maybe 2 or 3 a month would come across as a new listing. And I would say in the last 2 weeks, I've seen 10 new ones pop up. So why are they suddenly popping up? Do people need the money? Are people trying to sell, thinking things are going down and going to go down more? Are they getting out of the hobby? I don't know. But it does seem like grail type stuff is more plentiful all of a sudden. And if it's more plentiful all of a sudden, it seems like prices would come down all of a sudden. And if prices are coming down and they're more plentiful, now might be the time to go after those grail cards that we've wanted for a while, but haven't had the opportunity to pick up. I will only buy high-end vintage SGC cards which don't appear in auctions very often. I think those cards which often appear will not appreciate much in the next couple of years. I can always buy them at a later date, but I will overpay for a card which might not appear again for a couple of years. So this is a very similar response to the previous one. You know, the fact that the cards that don't show up very much, when they show up, you kind of have to buy when they're available. I mean, if there are a couple of houses in my community that I've always dreamt of owning, and then I'm not really thinking about buying a new house right now. I'm very content with where I live. But one of those dream homes hits the market, and I can kind of afford it. I can kind of pull it off. Even if I wasn't thinking now is the time I'm going to move, when it becomes available, that's really the time to buy. Because if it hasn't been available for a while and then suddenly it shows up, you may not have that opportunity again for a very, very long time. So if those cards are showing up, you got to get them. Especially if you're I can't afford, T206 cards in grades like 6, 7, and 8. But I can maybe afford them in 1, 2, or 3, depending on the card. So if I see one in a 2 that looks good to me, and it's centered, or it has the eye appeal that fits what I like, and one shows up, you kind of got to go for it. Because a lot of 1s, 2, and 3s aren't really that good looking. A lot of them have issues that would drive me crazy, and I wouldn't want them. So if you see a 2, and it's a nice looking 2, you have to go for it when it's there. Because the next 10 2s might have creases across the face, might have a stain across the bottom, might have something that bugs me, right? So if you see one in the grade that you want, and the grade seems to work for what your eye needs for the card, you should go for the card. So if those cards are coming up, you got to go and get them. I think that, these are 5 excellent pieces of advice. I think there are 5 things that don't just apply to buying cards, but apply to buying anything. If you've been thinking about buying a 67 Mustang for a long time, but you're not really thinking right now is the time, but suddenly you drive down the street and your neighbor has his up for sale, and it's a beauty, and the price is decent, you might be buying a 67 Mustang today, right? So all of these are things to consider. This is what I love about this community, is that you all have such great things to share, and we can all be learning from each other. And that's the beauty of this format too, is there are so many great things. And that's the reason I read every single comment that comes through, because all of you have knowledge and information and expertise and experience that we can all learn from. So I love this opportunity to share your thoughts. And I encourage all of you to always just take a second and read through the comments, because a lot of people have a lot of good things to say. Let's take a look at the upcoming week's question that I look forward to you answering in the comments below, because I'm very curious about this, because I certainly have a few thoughts on this topic. Let's take a look at the question. Where do you feel is the best place to buy sports cards, and why? So what do you think about that question? I'm not just interested in where you go to buy your cards, whether it be in person, on eBay, on PWCC, on Golden, on Facebook, on Instagram, you tell me where. But more importantly, the thing I want to know is why. Why do you go there? Do you go to Whatnot to buy cards? If so, why do you go to Whatnot? Why is that a place that you recommend and that you utilize? Why is that better than the other platforms? So don't just tell me where you go. I want to know why you go there. I have a lot of opinions on this one, and next week I'm going to share some of those opinions. But first, I want to hear your opinion, and then next week when I share some of your thoughts on this, I'll give you some of mine. I appreciate those of you who take the time to leave a comment and share your thoughts, because you're helping other collectors. You're helping other people to get ideas and make the hobby more fun. And ultimately what we all want and need is a healthy hobby where people are having success and having fun. So when we share tips and tricks and ideas and opinions with each other, it makes it more fun for others, and it makes the hobby healthier for all of us. So don't hesitate to share your thoughts.